The human mind, under the discipline of Hemisync, acts more like a laser beam, producing one disciplined stream of light, the energy of which is so concentrated and powerful, the document compares it to having the same qualities of the surface of the sun. This focusing of energy is like the yogic concept of one-pointedness, intense focus and mental stillness, a state without mental wandering or distraction.
If one keeps his mind, his energies and his consciousness organized in one direction for a certain period of time, everything could be explored by human consciousness.
The gateway process states that once this point is achieved, the mind has the opportunity to accelerate to higher and higher levels. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. Thus, you must be pointed to a higher frequency.
Alright, welcome everyone to the Best Damn Podcast. I am your host, John Keene. As always, I would like to thank you guys for joining me. Ask that you please add, follow, check us out. Instagram, Facebook, Best Damn Podcast, Twitter, The Real Best Damn. Wherever you're watching from, make sure to hit that like, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and share this link. Help me to get it out there. That's really the best way to support me, is it allows new people to find me. So yeah. Today we are going to be talking about the gateway experience, or the gateway process, the gateway project. It has quite a few different names. This is a redacted but unsealed CIA project file that gets into Hemisync and binaural beats, and this is an incredible spiritual experience that I myself have actually practiced, right? Using stereo headphones and different forms of sound, and this triggers a conscious experience within the human being. So we're going to be looking at that file tonight. We're going to be looking at the whole gateway experience. I've got some videos by the original owner of the Monroe Institute as well that we're going to show also for those that are interested. Also, guys, if you didn't catch last night's video, I did the Epstein documents release. It's two parts. One part was public. I put that on all the platforms. It did pretty good on Facebook, actually. And the part two is over on Patreon. So all of the donors and supporters, every Sunday we'll have a new private show for you guys. If you don't want to do the monthly billing thing through Patreon, which is patreon.com, Best Damn Podcast Official, you can donate through PayPal, Cash App, or Facebook Messenger Pay. And then text the number 513-393-2396, or email therealbestdampodcast@gmail.com, and I'll send you those links and you get access all month long. And also, same number, same email for those that are interested in booking personal tarot readings. I did try to get today's daily read up. For whatever reason, my video didn't record, or so it'll probably be posting as I'm doing this video for those that are interested in the daily tarot reads. So yeah, let me say thank you and big ups to everybody in the chat. Paolo TLC, and you done the first couple and noticed a lot of synchronicities in your life. Yeah, see, I've seen a lot of people, guys, that have actually tapped into this gateway experience and have for real had some profound fucking experiences. So I mean, like, this is just something I'm trying to just come out with things that I'm interested in myself, just to keep it all the way real with you and share these with people. And for those who have heard of it, maybe this will give you a chance to look a little bit deeper into it. Maybe if you just missed it at first as bullshit or psyop or whatever. And for those who haven't, quite obviously this will, bring something new. And we see Powerful Violet Truth. Hey there. Much love. Thank you. Graceful Heart. Up Yours 73. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate all of you. And hopefully I kicked off all those little links that are posting there. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this. Like I said, big ups, big things. I don't know if I say this enough, but I feel like I should. I am incredibly and sincerely grateful to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch my videos, for the people who donate and support to my channel, for the people who watch my tarot and all of that, like just everything. I'm very, very grateful for each and every one of you guys, and I'm so excited. I am so excited about this year. Like, I do want to just kind of reiterate, on Wednesdays we'll be doing Twitter Spaces for those who are interested. Sundays are the private shows, and we'll be doing a live show every Friday. I might throw some in like I have tonight as well, some extras. And the entire library content can be found on Patreon as well. But I just want you guys to know, like, for sticking with me all these years and just kind of supporting me and, helping me to grow. And, I'm really, really appreciative of that. And I can't tell you how much it's meant to me. So let's go ahead and jump into this. This is Bob Monroe on the consciousness enhancing benefits of the Gateway Voyage. So I'm not going to play this whole video. This is just going to try to really just, kick shit off, really. And this is kind of a dated video. So, yeah. But, this is by the Monroe Institute. That's who actually, held this experiment through the federal government. And there's a lot of people, and this gets into loosh and all kinds of shit. So without any further ado, let's just go to the video and then we'll jump into the document. And I will have this document on Patreon for people who want to download it. And I posted the links to the Epstein files in yesterday's video as well. So here we go.
How do you define something that is so intangible that even the results of it may not show up for weeks and perhaps months? Gateway in and of itself is properly defined as, say, a means of freedom, a new kind of freedom that perhaps you've never before experienced in your life. A chance at this new kind of freedom. Also, it's an exploration, say, of consciousness, and most particularly your consciousness. How does it do this? Well, I'm sure you're aware of, right at this particular moment, what we call Hemisync, or Hemisync, a loose term that we use for hemispheric synchronization, which is what you're here to do, to experience the process of hemispheric synchronization. If you don't know about it, perhaps I should hand out some brochures that tell you what Hemisync is. Suffice to say that it is a method. It is one of the tools, and perhaps the basic tool that we use in Gateway. And speaking of tools, that's what the real process is the teaching of mental tools to achieve this freedom that we speak of. And that freedom can only be expressed by your own consciousness, not mine, not any of the people who help you go through this Gateway process. It comes from your own actions. Now, we have only one particular piece of dogma that you have to consider. And that is that you, the essence of you, are more than your physical body. What that means beyond that particular statement is part of the exploration of consciousness that you yourself will enter into. Consciousness, such a loose word to describe something that's so tremendously vast. And human consciousness in and of itself, what we know of it today, is only perhaps a fraction of the reality of what human consciousness can be. Gateway helps you explore the borders, the edges of human consciousness as we know it. The tools we provide, again, help you do and perform that exploration. One of the things that we insist on, that you do understand, that Gateway does not guarantee that you will have an out-of-body experience. Now, of course, I know you, a lot of you perhaps came saying, oh, I will have an out-of-body experience. Percentage-wise, I would say that, what, 15% of the people who attend a gateway session have an out-of-body experience during the session. The tools are for consciousness, and the out-of-body state as we know it is a form of consciousness. The tools that we provide you perhaps at some time may let you achieve this state of being out of body.
And if you think about it too, I'm just going to chime in right here, sorry. When you're using this Hemisync technology, these binaural beats, which are essentially tapping into the different hemispheres of your brain through audio frequency or sound, from what I understand and from what I've read, which we're about to jump into the document in just a moment, once your body gets tuned into this process, right, this experience, not only through sound and frequency, because remember, all of us, we're made up of light and sound, period, right? Period. And it's these sounds that actually trigger these rhythmic patterns to trigger awakening experience or conscious experience within oneself. So it's like once the body actually catches on to the process, it's something you never, ever forget. It's something over time. It's like it's almost like a skill that can be attained even. So that's what he's saying is like, you know, the first time you try this, you may not actually have an out-of-body experience, but if you continue to use these tools, eventually, more than likely, you will. A lot of the people that are watching this video, I'd say if you guys tried this, you probably would first go, you know. Just because a lot of you guys are incredibly high consciousness people as it is, you know. I'm getting a million notifications background over here. But, you know, I have myself participated in this experience or in my own experiments, and I'm telling you, I'm hooked. I'm hooked. It absolutely opened up an entire another reality for me. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's like my mind accessed different parts of the three-dimensional space or the dimensional reality that was not accessible to me normally after using, you know, these practices and implementing them in my life, to the point so much so that to this day, anytime, you know, that I listen to headphones and a lot of the reason why I listen to the dark satanic music and shit like that is because a lot of those music actually has binaural beats in them, like naturally, because that's the way that type of music is actually made. So if people's ever wondering like why I'm such a dark fuck, that's why. Because I actually like what that music does as far as like the Hemisync process and triggering, you know, my consciousness. That real distorted, you know, electronic sound or frequency is really effective for those type of things, especially when you're using stereo headphones. But I do know that to this day, anytime I put on a pair of headphones, which I wear daily, I'm able to now tap into this experience to where sound almost becomes an extension of self, and to where I have been able to recognize myself, not just in the music I'm listening to or in the frequencies or sounds that I'm taking in, but in every single person and in every single thing. Like I have now been able to identify that oneness that is in me and you and all of us. And at first, it, you know, I won't lie, it was a really hard thing for me to accept. It's like opening a trap door in consciousness almost. It's like you think reality is one way. You know, you think you have one version of reality, and then when you finally see the fucking reality for what it actually is, it's mind-blowing, and it can almost feel like a state of psychosis even. Matter of fact, there was a girl on TikTok that does tarot readings. I was talking to earlier, and she had, posted something about having, some sort of psychosis, and I was like, that actually sounds like an awakening experience to me. It's like anybody who's ever been through like a real intense shift in frequency or a shift in consciousness knows that it almost feels like fucking schizophrenia or a psychotic episode, because it's madness compared to what we know as normalcy, right? It's like it breaks the bounds or the laws or the so-called laws of our perceived reality or of our perception. So to us it seems crazy, We start having all these answers and ideas to riddles and things that we have never even imagined, let alone thought of before. We're able to conceive of concepts that we have never thought of before. And when we start speaking this to other people, especially people that are not in tune, tapped in, or aware, we sound like fucking lunatics, So.
But there's no guarantees in this particular program that will take place either during the program itself or subsequently. If so, I think you check with our friendly supervisors who are waiting nearby, and they will be glad to say, well, I'm sorry, this is not for you. If that's your total expectation, because we can't guarantee it. How could we guarantee what any human being will do? The opportunity, yes. The possibility, yes. The tools, as I said, yes. Guarantee, no. So, with that in mind, and that this is an exploration of consciousness for you, if you learn these tools and you apply them, indeed it will give you an indescribable kind of freedom in the days, weeks, the rest of your life. That's what these tools can do. However, we have one small problem, maybe two, maybe three. To utilize these tools properly, you have to begin at least the primary stage of understanding yourself. How do you do this? You have to understand, first of all, what you are, where you are, and later on you will find perhaps why you are. There are barriers that you encounter in this exploration of consciousness. These barriers in and of themselves are not insurmountable, but albeit they are barriers. There are two, possibly three primary barriers that will stand in your way. The first of those is fear. And the fear association and the underlying pattern of fear-rage is the primary one. And you say, oh, I don't have any fear. Oh, I don't have any rage within me. Some of the most profound people have made that statement, and when they begin to uncover other elements in their exploration of consciousness, elements of themselves, they discover this fear and this rage. And as they probe deeper, and this is why this thing is so important, this prime position of accepting or considering a belief, this rage and fear among most people has to do with death. It's a fear that I will die because of an immense pattern that you have developed from birth, perhaps imprinted at birth, that said survive. And we have learned to take that survival imprint just because of physical living. And that survival says physical survival. And physical survival is totally destroyed if there is such a thing as death. Once you have the knowledge of that fear, and it is the undercurrent of all of us, there is the related factor, and that's rage. What's the rage all about? The rage is due to the fact that you're going to have to die. See how they connect? Fear. I'm afraid I'm going to die. To anger because I have to die. And that defeats the whole concept, the entire concept of survival. Because that imprint you have learned or believe has to do strictly with physical survival. So much of your life has been geared to physical survival. Virtually all of our culture is aimed at physical survival. So what are we talking about? Consider that first pattern. The first pattern being, I am more than my physical body. If you consider that premise, that tiny piece of dogma, as possibly being real, then you have to consider very seriously that being more than your physical body, you also may well continue to be more than your physical body. That is one of the prime possibilities of freedom that Gateway provides. But the tools help you determine that there, one, is a pattern in existence where this more than the physical you survives a thing we call physical death. That's one of the prime ones. How is this covered over? This is covered over by the enculturation that is worldwide. It's not peculiar to our, quote, American cultural system. It's worldwide. The fact that we, in turn, have established belief systems that set up boundaries that encase all of us within a box. And that's the limit of our belief systems. And we feel safe and secure, as our culture helps us do, in these particular belief systems that create the box, and we do not want necessarily to remove the box. And in removing just a little crack in the box may seem very, very, very dangerous to all of these belief systems that have, well, perhaps we learned some of them on our mother's knee. Perhaps in school we learned them. They've been all around us. The things, the structures that create a box that limits us. Gateway helps you create windows and doors in that box. That box in which I have been, in which I am still to a very great degree. And your box is much the same. I've been in your box. My box has many holes in it now, of course. And yet that box still exists because I am here now. What is your box? I can't tell you what your box is. That restrains you. It took me long enough to find out what mine was, never mind yours. And I'm not interested in knowing the details of your box. And my job is to act as a catalyst to help you create doors and windows in that box. Gateway. Freedom. Freedom from the box.
Yeah, freedom from the box. I mean, god damn, this is so old and so dated, but yet at the same time, so fucking profound. And I think James Dunn said, yeah, profound. You know, his voice is hypnotic. It actually is. Yeah, well, and these are these walls of perception that we create around ourselves. We know that the Saturn death cult, the black cube, that is the box, you know. And it's time, time. If we look at 666, it actually translates to time. So the construct of life and the system that we have build around ourselves is that box, you know. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this. We will go back and forth. I have the entire Monroe Institute videos too. So, I mean, we won't be able to play all of them, obviously, but I'll go back and forth between the documents and the videos and stuff like that to try to keep it interesting. I will take, questions or people that have anything to add, just put it in the chat. I'm trying to pay attention to the chat as well. So, like I said, hit that thumbs up, guys, if you're in the chat. So, approved for release. This is the CIA, Department of the Army, U.S. Army Operational Group, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command. The subject, analysis and assessment of the Gateway process. And this is the 9th of June, 1983. And this was the year I was born. So this was 40 fucking years ago, dude. It just kind of goes to show you, like, the shit that we're just now stumbling across. And this is what's probably the most amazing thing to me of all of it. It's like the shit like you and myself and like all of our, our conscious family, if you will, our spirit family, if you will, is like all like, posting online and making videos about and, writing about and stumbling across now today. Like it's not a new concept at all. It's like we're rediscovering and relearning something that's already been known, from ancient times, a long time ago. And science and the government and, the military-industrial complex, all of these different groups connected to the powers that be have had a deep understanding and poured billions and billions and billions of dollars into understanding the nature of consciousness and have kind of hidden it from all of us, to keep us from coming to this understanding. And now it's all being unveiled. It's all out in the open. And it's said, like the Bible even says, right, in the last days, this is like knowledge is increasing. It's like we're here now. It's like this is becoming common knowledge. It's really crazy. So to the commander, U.S. Army Operational Group, Fort Meade, Maryland. 1. You tasked me to provide an assessment of the Gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I need to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why the process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. Initially based on conversations with a physician who took the Gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Itzhak Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use physics to bring the whole phenomena of out-of-body states into the language of physical science to remove the stigma of its occult connotations and put it in a frame of reference suited to objective assessment. Number 2, I began the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental biomedical factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation. And I did think I see somebody in the chat actually comment on transcendental meditation, so that their objectives and mode of functioning could be compared to the reader's mind with the Gateway experience as the model of its underlying mechanics was developed. Additionally, that introductory material is useful in supporting the conclusions of the paper. I indicate that at times these related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the gateway experience. Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaints about the obtuse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, quote, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical." The physics of altered human consciousness deal with some conceptualizations that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left brain linear thinking. So, to borrow Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right brain, intuitive insight, to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I am confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rationale critique. For, paradoxically, having gone to such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on an occult or dogmatic frame of reference, in the end, I found it necessary to return, at least briefly, to the question of the impact of the gateway experience on common belief systems. I did so because although it was essential to avoid attempting to render an assessment in the context of such systems, I felt that it was necessary, after having completed the analysis, to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems, unless that point is clearly established. The danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and is therefore alien to all that they hold to be right and true. This study is certainly not designed to be the last word on the subject, but I hope that the validity of its basic structure and of the fundamental concepts upon which it is based will make it a useful guide for other Usain's Com personnel who are required to take the gateway training or work with gateway materials. And that's Wayne M. McDonnell, Commander, Detroit. The gateway experience, brain hemisphere synchronization and perspective. And give me just 1 second, guys. Let me get my other phone over here. Okay, it was driving me crazy. It was vibrating over there. So, introduction. In order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the gateway experience involving brain hemisphere synchronization, or Hemisync, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlay operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is easiest to effectively describe what gateway is by beginning with a short description of those associated techniques that share some common aspects with the gateway experience, but which are nevertheless different. In this way, we can develop a frame of reference at the outset which will provide useful concepts to explain and understand gateway by comparison. I don't know why when I read I get the yawns. Number 2. Hypnosis. And think about like Dolores Cannon and, you know, the QHHT and all of that shit with like hypnosis and what we see now with channeling and all of this. Like, this is like a, you know, a very beginning stage of a lot of that shit, you know. According to the theories of psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Ishtok Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers, and lower cerebral or emotional portions and associated pleasure centers of the right side of the human brain, following successful disengagement of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain is the self-cognitive, verbal, and linear reasoning component of the mind. It fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. The right hemisphere, which functions as the non-critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. And think about that. This is the pattern-oriented component of the brain. So the reason that we're able to pick up on patterns and symbols and things like that is because that right divine, feminine, intuitive side of the brain, which is like the God side of your brain, if you will, is what's actually picking up on that. And that is your all-knowing side of the brain as well, right? That's the side of the brain that already knows everything, right? It has all knowledge. It's the one that's tapped into the Akash, right? It has knowledge of all things past, present, and future. And whenever people tap into states of hypnosis, that's what they're actually tapping into, is that divine, feminine, or intuitive aspect of the self. And whenever people are also doing things like hypnosis or forms of mind control, whether it's neuro-linguistic programming, priming, semantics, any of those things, that's exactly what they're actually speaking to. And somebody sent me a video, and it's called Disclosure, right, by the Jason Shirka or whatever, right? And it's about the children in the underground tunnels and all this. And it's like, what I noticed in this video, and I was like talking to the person about it, was like that's what they were actually doing in this video, was like speaking to the subconscious mind of the people that were viewing it, right? So like in a lot of ways, you'll hear people, whenever they're trying to speak to that part of you, they'll use very non-descriptive terms, right? And it's like a basic underlying message within a message, if that makes sense. Some of you guys will know what I'm talking about. It's like you'll hear a person talking, right? And they appear to be saying one thing on the surface, right? But you can read between the lines and hear what they're saying underneath what they're actually saying. And that's because you're tapped into some form of hemisynchronization, right, within yourself. You're already tapped into the subconscious. You're already tapped into the right side. You're already tapped into the intuitive. So you're able to catch those patterns that are actually triggering or priming the subconscious part of the brain. And people that are not, or that are on psychotropic drugs or induced hypnosis through television and things like that, right, are being spoken to through the suggestive part of the subconscious brain, and they're completely and totally unaware of it, and they're being sent and delivered messages, signals, and all of these things to push them in certain directions and influence them in certain ways. But it also can have the other effect. It's not just negative to mind control people. It can also trigger a fucking awakening as well. It can be a catalyst, like the dude said right in the video, to actually prime you and get you to start noticing those patterns. Because once you start picking up on them, you won't stop, right? Once the brain recognizes something, it always recognizes something. Same way with the hemisynchronization with the audio, right? You're hearing those sounds and frequencies. Once your brain gets in synchronized with these audio sounds and frequencies, it never stops. Your body learns it and can tune in, tap in every time it puts on stereo headphones. Same thing with the, quantum hypnosis, right? Once you start speaking to the subconscious and you're able to pick up on those patterns of the subconscious, you'll never stop. You'll hear it in everything. And it's like you won't just hear the person. That's what's the wildest fucking thing about it. Like, you won't just hear the person speaking. You'll hear the divine, almost, right? Because that's what that intuitive right side of us is. So it's like when I was telling you at the beginning of the video that, like, I've had these experiences where I could see myself or hear myself in everyone, right? It wasn't actually me that I was hearing, although it was. But it was that animating force that's within each and every one of us. And it was speaking through everything I heard, because my brain had gotten kind of groomed, if you will, or conditioned, if you will, or primed, if you will, into picking up on that subconscious speak, right? And it stuck out to me like a pattern. So it's like that's what I would pay attention to instead of what was being spoken on the top or on the surface. Now, it fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. The right hemisphere, which functions as a non-critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. Consequently, if the left hemisphere can be distracted either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state, external stimuli, to include hypnotic suggestions, are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere where they are accepted and acted upon directly. And that video, the disclosure video with the Jason Shirker, they kept repeating this word transducing, which means to like transfer one information to another person, right? Like, or through DNA or through genetics, but it's like the transfer of information. It's like they kept saying this word over and over, and it's like I'm watching this video, I'm like, oh my god, like this is some pure hypnosis shit right here, you know. You guys, I probably should stream those videos on the channel just in case people haven't seen them. It's really interesting, you know, if you're into that kind of stuff. Now it says, the semi-sleep state, external stimuli to include hypnotic suggestions are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere where they are accepted and acted upon directly. The result may involve an emotional reaction originating in the lower cerebral region or sensory motor responses requiring involvement in the cortex and so on. So it could actually invoke an emotional response, and that's actually that's what trauma-based mind control and all that shit is really about, right? That's why they desensitize you with sex and violence and all those things, are triggering an emotional response. Why? To cut off the logical side of your brain. That way you can be in a suggestive state. You can essentially be brainwashed, right? Where am I at here? And so on. Both the sensory and the motor cortices of the right cerebral portion of the brain contain a sequence of points known as the homonucleus, which correspond to points in the body. See Exhibit 1 on the next page. Stimulation of the corresponding area on the cortex causes intermediate responses in the associated portions of the body. Consequently, induction of the suggestion that the left leg is numb, if it reaches the right hemisphere unchallenged and is referred to the appropriate area of the sensory cortex, will result in an electrical reaction being generated that will induce the cortex, which will result in an electrical reaction feeling of numbness, which is fucking wild. That lets you know that your entire goddamn reality is made up right here, right? It's right here. And if you get past that masculine left brain speaking part of your mind that is the ego, right? And tap into that divine, intuitive, feminine aspect of the self, that you can absolutely create your own reality if you want to, or you can have someone create it for you, whichever you prefer, right? Suggestion that the person experiencing a general feeling of happiness as well as being would be referred to the appropriate pleasure centers located in the lower cerebral portion or in the cortex of the right hemisphere, thereby inducing the suggestive feeling of euphoria. Finally, suggestions such as the one that informs a hypnotic subject that he enjoys enhanced concentration or powers of memory would be responded to in the right hemisphere by accessing unused information storage capacity normally held in reserve as a result of left hemisphere selection and control processes. This aspect will become significant in the context of the gateway process, when attention is given to examining the way that the hypnosis may be used to accelerate progress in the early stages of the gateway experience. Now think about that. Think about that. What they're actually saying, they're saying you can, and remember, our higher self is essentially the light aspect of us that tunes into the divine and all of that. And our subconscious, or our mirrored self, our shadow, is storing all that information, right? So we can actually tap into all of that storage of information. And that's why when we get awakened or triggered, we have an event that catalyzes us, right, into this state where we're circumventing the ego through an ego death or a process. Is a scientific way of looking at it too, but this is also, if you look at any spiritual practice, they follow the same principles, right? So if we circumvent the ego or the left brain, the thinking mind, the ego mind, and we go to the the intuitive feminine part of our brain, the God mind, which knows everything, not only can we create our own reality, but and be able to perceive things however we want. We're able to tap into, the divine spiritual and, all of these things. But we can also have the access to the unused information, which would be like akin to this, DNA or genetic storage, your ancestors, or the Akash, right? The Akashic record, the things that you have transmitted through light, right? The learning and frequency that you have, soaked in through the sun throughout your entire experience. Remember, the sun is pure awareness, giving off information. It's a projection of information going through that prism that we call the electromagnetic field, which is essentially the collective third eye, or the octave lens, if you will, of the entire collective, right? So that prism, right? It's that holographic universe, right? It's just flooding us with light. We're perceiving it, receiving it, processing it, storing it constantly. We're like computers, Number 3, transcendental meditation. On the other hand, transcendental meditation works in a distinctly different fashion. In this technique, intense and protracted single-minded concentration on the process of drawing energy up the spinal cord. Does this sound familiar? Ultimately results in what appears to be creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral. And I don't know if anybody's ever had a true Kundalini experience where they can feel that energy go from the root all the way up to the crown. And when you really have like a third eye experience where it's wide the fuck open, you will feel it pulsing. I mean, literally pulsating. Right? And that's that acoustic wave, that sound wave. You're giving off your own, right? Your own frequency, your own vibe, right? If you've ever been in that state, then you know what I'm talking about. And you can see here, this is, and let me see if I can drop this in the chat for you guys, at least, or try to. Oh, I don't have my chat box up. Shit. I will post this, though, on Patreon and shit for you guys and put it in the description. Alright, that way you guys can go get this afterwards. But you can see they're showing you the figure, the homunculus, sensory cortex, all the different parts that we just talked about. You can see like the lateral view and all of that. Right, the motor sensory cortex and the third and lateral ventricles. Right, so these are just like the two different parts that we discussed. Now, the cortex on the right side of the brain, as a result, according to Bentov, these waves will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homunculus, starting from the toes and on up. The Bentov biomedical model, as described in a book by Lee Sinella, MD, entitled Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence. And I love this because I just talked about this at the very fucking beginning of the video. This induced psychosis that happens when you've been triggered into an awakening experience. It's like the trap door falling out of your fucking reality, And a lot of people think they're going crazy. I myself have been there where it's like, the reality is not the same that you grew up with. The reality is totally different, and everybody in it appears totally different. Everybody's mask is off because your filter has finally come down. You no longer have ego brain, left brain, logical brain blocking your perception. You're now into your intuition. You now have the ability to project and create and, do a lot more than you could ever do before. And it's an intense experience because when that door busts open consciously, whatever's on the other side is going to come through. And if you haven't been living a pure life, which I bet you haven't, if it's your first awakening or your first few, because a lot of us go through multiple series of awakening because consciousness, in my opinion, is like an onion, right? Those 7 chakras representing the 7 main planets of the solar system, or the 7 colors of the rainbow, right? Or the 7 heavens, so on and so forth, right? And it's circumambulation, right? It's like orbiting inwardly, right, within ourselves. So it's like one awakening after another as we're going with that Kundalini process, going through the universe, or U inverted, all the way up to the crown, right? and back down and up again, right? And it's this purification process and this process of different dimensional explorations of the inner self, right? So each dimensional aspect of the self is going to appear to be different than the perceived reality that you have interpreted from your life before, right? So the Kundalini psychosis or transcendence states that the standing acoustical waves are the result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice and meditation. Now think about that. They're the altered rhythm of heart sounds. We know that the heart generates an electromagnetic field with a 6-foot radius. You think about the whole social distancing thing where they had to 6 feet apart, right? And I'm wondering too how this would affect the third eye, considering the third eye is like the magnetic pole of the body. So, you know, these are the two magnetic centers of ourselves, right? So, and the heart represents the earth energy, right? Because earth is an anagram for heart, E-A-R-T-H, right? H-E-A-R-T-H, right? So, just saying. And it says, the way is a result of altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation, and which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain. In addition, according to Bentov, the states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemisphere, so that's the full loop of the hemispheres, right, in the brain caused by circulation of a current, and it's an electrical current, it's an energetic current, it's a circulation, it's going up and down, right? Along the sensory cortex. Bentov also notes, and remember your brain is the same thing, it's electrical synapses firing back and forth, and that's why these traumatic experiences fragment those electrical synapses, making them branch off from one solid, unified, electrical arc into two. Okay, and that most of the described symptoms start on the left side of the body means that it is mostly development occurring in the right hemisphere. Although normally a period of meditation involves intense concentration and practice for 5 years, or some is required to bring up the Kundalini. So it's saying essentially that this stimulation, right, that the Kundalini practice and meditation, it takes 5 years to trigger in a Kundalini awakening experience. Okay? 5 years. Now with this, not the same, right? Way faster. Although normally a period of meditation involving intense concentration and practice for 5 years, or some, is required to bring up the Kundalini, Bentov states that exposure of mechanical or acoustical vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz cycles per sound for protracted periods may achieve the same effect. So this sound, this Hemisync, right, will actually trigger that Kundalini experience in a way fucking faster time. And it makes you wonder why all the different cathedrals back in the day had these amazing acoustics in them, right? You think they knew something? Just saying. And for protracted periods may achieve the same effect. Bentov cites as an example repeated riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce that range of vibrations, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. He also notes that the cumulative effect of these vibrations may be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have a particularly sensitive nervous system. And depending on, what, and I know a lot of people don't believe in this, but I do, your astrological sign a lot of times can dictate, how sensitive your nervous system is. Like Virgos are in our guts, right? We have, weak stomachs, or we're associated with the gut, which is your second brain, and a lot of time it translates into being very nervous or having anxiety. So it's like a weaker nervous system. So a lot of Virgos are more sensitive to things like that. And that's just one sign. There's more than one sign, obviously, that's sensitive to these things, but I'm just giving an example. Now,
there are a few other things that might help you in turn get started on this gateway voyage, this gateway discovery of who you are, why you are, what you are. And part of that is in turn most importantly, a way whereby you can get a different perspective on yourself and where you are. And being kind of a lazy type and running out of words, if you will join me over at that favorite device called a flip chart, I'll try and get my left hand to work to describe it a little more graphically, or at least it gives me an excuse to describe it more graphically. Well, this is a flip chart. And flip charts are supposed to flip. So suppose we flip the flip chart. And happily we have something on the flip chart courtesy of a friend. What was I going to talk about? Oh, yes. Who we are, where we are, why we are. The best I can do at this moment is to help you begin to understand where you are. Therefore, it's easier to do it graphically. Let's take these different patterns of the human. Let's assume that B stands for birth. And this is a line of growth, of experience as a human. Let's say that this is a path. And this...
I've also seen this chart explained in like dimensional or frequencies, like 3rd, 5th, and 7th dimension. So let's just see what it does here.
Expresses what I will call a state of innocence. At birth, you begin this pattern as a clean slate, as a human clean slate in human consciousness. As you begin to grow, you lose these parts of innocence. You lose only part of them under a standard procedure. Look over here and I'll show you what I mean. The average human loses this innocence for a given part of his life, and then on the rest of his life, he moves along to the exit point, which some people like to call death. I'm one of them. Along this path of innocence to an exit point, and most of that loss of innocence occurs during the first 20-some plus years of a human life. How does one lose this innocence? One loses this innocence through the old familiar cause and effect law. What is that law in terms of innocence? A child, a little child we hope, learns through cause and effect that if he touches this hot stove, the stove burns his fingers. Therefore, he has lost his innocence relative to stove-burned fingers. In doing so, he has picked up authority and responsibility, which go hand in hand with cause and effect. Authority, responsibility. He now has the authority to continue to burn his fingers and the responsibility for having burned fingers, because Mommy can't be around all the time to see that he doesn't burn his fingers, because he's a sneaky type. But he has learned for himself that he can no longer get away with the effects of touching hot stove. So he picks up the authority and the responsibility. That is that path of innocence. The more authority, the more responsibility that you assume in your life, the greater the loss of your innocence.
And think about that too, you know. That just really makes me think of like mass indoctrination into like the mysteries and what we're kind of seeing right now, you know. Because what it is doing is increasing spiritual authority if you will, by making us aware of everything that's going on to the world, and it's like this total loss of innocence, for society as a whole. So I just wanted to throw that out on a side note.
However, because of how we live, the culture in which we live, and this is worldwide, we turn that authority over to others, and concurrently we turn the responsibility over to others. Of course, mommy and daddy take care of it up to a certain stage in our culture, and purportedly are supposed to let go after that, and let that human assume his own authority and his own responsibility. Be that as it may, if you look back over and see this path, it's very flat, because of at this point we learn certain growth, and moving on through here we turn it over generally to the enculturation of others, and that's what produces the box in part. Now, first, the tools that are a part of Gateway, the process of Gateway changes that, accelerates that pattern of loss of innocence and the accumulation of authority, responsibility. So that is moving over on this path over here to a mystical state called adulthood. And that state of adulthood is virtually an unattainable goal, but we reach as far as we can to obtain this form of adulthood. Adulthood, in and of itself, the assumption of as much authority and responsibility as we can. Now, so that's one gauge of where we are, and look what we may do in terms of reaching that goal of adulthood. All right? Next stage. Here, let's say over here, is a road. Same pattern. Birth. And this is the road of maturity, we call it. Again, a learning process that stops here, ordinarily, and moves along in a relative level path over to the exit point. Level. Gathers very, very little more of what we call maturity. How does one measure this business of maturity? Again, this is from our perspective. One measures maturity based upon the number of illusions that you have discarded or released. Illusions.
Think about that. One bases maturity on the number of illusions that you have discarded or released. By illusions, I don't want to speak foreign here, but by illusions, are we talking about dreams, fantasies, right? Things outside of the physical norm or that box that we're in?
Not disillusions, not illusions torn from you by some traumatic event or by things beyond your control, but your deliberate release of illusions. Perhaps the most cherished ones are the most difficult ones to release, but that's part of it. There you go. Again, then, this gateway process in leading to that almost unattainable goal of maturity is measured, again, along the number of illusions, the amount of illusions that you have discarded or released. The gateway process, again, helps you, assists you, but no more, does not define by any manner or means your illusions that you will release and discard, leading to this pattern of maturity. Maturity.
And I would see that as in like the concept of, our illusory perception of the world, right? Like the way that we see things and the way societal standards and norms have perceived things to be, which is not necessarily true or factual in the way that we're thinking, and it's like when you truly begin like an ascension process in itself, you notice like these are things that happen. It's like all these illusions and shit start to fall away, and that's part of the ascension, right? Is gradually, transcending societal norms, gradually transcending the bounds of reality, gradually transcending the limitations or perceived limitations that we've placed on ourselves.
Release of illusions. Now we have another highway, because it becomes more significant. We had a path, a road, and now a highway. This highway begins at birth, has pretty much the same growth statement, but this highway leads to an indefinable state that we call wisdom, an unattainable goal way up here. Wisdom. How do we measure that pattern? As you can see, the wisdom pattern, again, is very, very flat. Gateway process, the tools, if you use them, lead you again on a higher and higher reaching curve leading to wisdom. It's not to say that you'll get to this total wisdom. How do you measure that? That is measured along the scale of your actions, what you do, think, and be upon the release of the illusions that you get rid of. Discard, understand. That's the measurement of wisdom. The measurement of wisdom. Again, the flat line as against this growth line provided by what you are into now. Gateway. Finally, and the most difficult to define of all, is what we've tried already to say, and that's freedom. And generally here, freedom may occur somewhere where you're past 21, past voting age, or whatever it is. And that's a flat line. Again, look at these flat lines, and here, wisdom, maturity, innocence, freedom. And the freedom that we're speaking about is so far off the scale I can't even measure it. This is perhaps an inch in 100,000 miles. How is that measured? How do we measure that sum on the direction of freedom? That is a compendium of these three growth patterns, these three patterns of development. That's the freedom. How to express that freedom for you individually? I wouldn't think to even seriously consider how in turn to define freedom for you. I can for me, but I can't for you. Those are the boxes we are all in. The freedom is moving out away from the confines of those boxes. Those boxes, your box, mine, whatever. That's the best way I can describe what the freedom is. So anyway, I've had my fun with my chart. Let me go over here.
Yeah. So I mean, it's really an interesting concept. We're going to go back to the document here. We start back at biofeedback. This is the third consciousness altering methodology, which will be briefly described as biofeedback. Biofeedback is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere. to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral, motor, and sensory cortices, and assorted pain or pleasure centers. Instead of suppressing the left hemisphere as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it as is done in transcendental meditation, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience and successful right hemisphere access to specific lower cerebral. And that, you know, if you think about like any person, like some Abraham Hicks or, you know what I mean, like some real law of attraction manifestation shit, you know, it's like visualize it, then follow the feeling, right? Like building that momentum. You know, it sounds a whole lot like that is all I'm saying. And the cortex, pain, or pleasure, other areas in the brain are needed to produce the desired result. Special self-monitoring devices, such as the digital thermometer, are used to inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying the right hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area. Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways involved so as to produce the same external objective measures of success. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Once the brain learns how to access this shit, it continuously like pounds it out over and over and over. Once it's created the pathway, that's all it needs to do. You just got to do it once with these different practices. And once you've created that neural pathway, you have made, you know, you've paved the way, in essence, for your brain to do it over and over and to get really good at it. Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways involved so as to produce the same external objective measures of success. In this way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to such an extent that left brain consciousness is enabled and emphasized to access appropriate areas in right brain using a conscious demand mode. For example, if the subject wishes to increase the circulation in the left leg in order to speed up healing, he may concentrate with his left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the left leg. When the concentrated effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg. At that point, the subject can mentally, left brain, associate the sensations experienced with the result achieved and can begin to emphasize by memory recall the same process to cause its strengthening by affirmation and repetition. In this way, pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. The body's pleasure centers can be stimulated and a variety of specific physiological results may be achieved. In addition, biofeedback may be used to greatly accelerate achievement of deep meditative states, particularly for beginners. For beginners who have no experience in meditative techniques and whose progress in that methodology is enhanced through effective visualization and external objective affirmation. Display of the subject's brainwave pattern on a cathode ray tube has proven to be a laboratory validated means by which subjects may quickly learn to place themselves in profoundly relaxed states characterized by the sort of quietude and singularity of mental focus associated with advanced meditation. Number 5, and this is my favorite right here of all of them, Gateway and Hemisync. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers, right? That storage of information, which differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation, is its use of the Hemisync technique, which is defined in a monograph by the Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Yeager as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. They're beating together, basically. Although Hemisync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, Melissa Yeager states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain Hemisync with basic developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain Hemisync with the Institute's basic Focus 3 tapes. She also notes that studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Menninger Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish Hemisync at will, sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Dr. Stuart Twemlow, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that in our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy. It can be measured as with a light bulb and encourage the focusing of brain energy, and it can be measured in a light bulb in watts in a narrower and narrower frequency band. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which may translate in Western terms as single-mindedness. Dr. Twemlow goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond Focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. Now think about that. And I'm going to put all of this like on the Patreon and shit. I'll put like all the entire video series, the audio tapes, all of it, and the documents for everybody to check out. Is it YouTube glitching now? I don't see any glitching on. I got a YouTube up here watching just to make sure. I don't see any glitching on YouTube, so it could just be your phone. Lamp versus laser. Melissa Yeager uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of Hemisync in the gateway experience. She points out that the human mind, in its natural state, may be likened to an ordinary lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way, which diffuses its energy over a wide area of rather limited depth. On the other hand, the human mind, under the discipline of Hemisync, acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a disciplined stream of light. The stream of energy is laser beam, which is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both, so that the human mind is soon resonating at even higher vibrational levels. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived as astonishing flashes of holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and oral perception. The mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper. And that's the thing. Once you are able to access this part of yourself, and I'm just, be totally fucking real with you. Like, I'm a firm believer in this process, by the way. Like, I'm a believer. I'm devout in the belief of this because I've used it myself and it's worked wonders in my life. Like, it's really opened me up in ways nothing has. And it's very practical and easy to do on top of that. And once you have accessed that part of yourself to where not only the illusions begin to fall away, and like I said, we can, we're looking at it from a scientific point of view, but we also know that this, any mystery or occult or spiritual practice, this is the same process, essentially, different versions or variations of it, but the same process in essence, right? You're just getting like you're getting a boost, if you will, through technology to allow yourself to do it easier and faster than meditating for 5 fucking years, and once you are able to access that universal energy of the all, and once you're able to make that kundalini rise and you feel that pulsating in your crown and in your third eye, and it's that focus of all of that energy too. It's like no longer, it's focused. You're able to tap into that storage of information. You're also able to see everything, perceive everything from a higher dimensional space. So the information you have is on a higher dimensional level. You no longer see things from an exoteric understanding. You see the esoteric in everything, even if it's not meant to be esoteric. You'll perceive it in that way. You'll see everything from the dimensional space that you're existing at consciously. So if you're at a frequency that's way the fuck up here, it doesn't matter if you're talking to somebody that's way down here, you will be communicating with the part of themselves that exists up in the higher ethers, right? That's the part that you're communicating with, even if they're not aware of it, right? They're speaking normal language, they're speaking exoteric, they're speaking physical, they're speaking left brain to you, right? They think they're just talking about the weather, but the way that you're perceiving it, because you've been able to key in on those patterns, your brain recognizes those patterns, is able to circumvent the egoic mind, right? And tap into those patterns and symbolism and channel that energy. You're now perceiving it from a way higher space, right? And you're able to pick up on that, right? And see that universal or the all energy within everyone and everything. And it opens up an entire new world to you. Frequency following response. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the Hemisync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as a frequency following response, or FFR, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Therefore, if the subject is in fully awake state, but hears sound frequencies which approximates brainwave output at theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern to the normal beta to the theta level. Since the theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to a sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist, as the brain strives to entrain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sound which can be heard in pure form by the human ear, Hemisync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz, below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them. The beat frequency, because our brain makes up, our mind is consciously creating our reality. So if things are not consistent in what we're seeing in one eye or another, or hearing in one ear or the other, we'll take both of them and we'll make our own pattern out of it. That's how awesome we are. We're always creating our own reality, no matter if we believe that or not. Matter of fact, the optical nerve isn't even connected directly to the brain, which shows you whatever you're seeing is being manifest on a thin air, basically. The availing itself of the FFR phenomena and using the technique of beat frequencies, the gateway system uses Hemisync and other audio techniques employing the FFR phenomena to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at virtually subliminal, marginally audible levels. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote the production of even higher amplitude and frequencies of brainwave outputs. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions by Bob Monroe accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds, such as sea surf, to mask the sound frequencies where desirable. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with the tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of the tapes, so as to access via intuitive means new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness. So it's like they're using a combination of all these, and think about this too. In music, right? When you're listening to music, okay? Like the different ad libs and shit that they're putting in this music, or the back masking and all of that, like these undertones of different messages and shit. They're speaking to the subliminal mind, right? They're giving you subliminal messages, right? That's where a lot of this stuff comes from, Role of resonance, however, brain coherence through entertainment to beat frequencies induced via stereo headphones is only part of the reason why the gateway system works. It is also designed to achieve the physical quietude characteristic of deep transcendental meditative states, which brings about a complete alteration of the fundamental resonance pattern associated with the sound frequencies produced by the human body. Yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. Think about that. Your heart resonating through the entire fucking body, because you're that in tune with yourself. And your heart's acting as like this energetic pump, right? According to Bentov, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronously up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance approximately 7 times a second. There's that number 7 again. Bentov describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows, quote, when the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. When the pressure pulse reaches bifurcation in the lower abdomen, which is where the aorta forks into two and goes into the legs, part of the pressure pulse rebounds and starts traveling up the aorta. If in the meantime the heart ejects more blood, a new pressure pulse is traveling down. These two pressure points will eventually collide somewhere along the aorta and produce an interference pattern. By placing the body in a sleep-like state, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood into the aorta. The result is a regular, rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound which echoes through the body and rises up into the head in sustained resonance. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern, when measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it is operating normally. Brain stimulation. Bentov's biomedical model shows that this resonance is of considerable importance since it is directly transmitted to and impacts upon the brain. Now, the resulting vibration is received and transmitted into the brain itself via the fluid-filled third and left ventricles located above the brain stem. An electromagnetic pulse is then generated, which stimulates the brain to raise the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output, just as Dr. Twemlow observed in his research on the effects of Hemisync tapes. And think about that, EMP and how it actually has the ability to affect the human brain, and what we see with 5G technology, electromagnetic pulse, silent warfare, 6th generation warfare, and all this stuff that we're seeing now, or even EMLP, electromagnetic laser pulse, that's now being rolled out into the public. So, and think about the effects as well of like our cell phones, our cellular devices, and all this shit. I have an iPhone 12. I read an article talking about the amount of radiation that comes off of one of these fucking things. That it's literally been outlawed in some countries, the model I have. So it's like, how does that actually disrupt, right, our electromagnetic frequency, or the waves of our brain, or the electrical synapses that are firing within our brain, or the energetic flow of our chakras and kundalini system? You know what I mean? Also, the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is in turn cushioned by a thin layer of fluid between it and the skull. As a coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain. And think about the blood-brain barrier where they were giving the test and shit, and they busted that blood-brain barrier, when they were giving the jab, which had that graphene oxide, which then would go to the heart or to the pineal, the magnetic pole. I'm just saying that's a total disruption of the system. Okay? Just saying, man. And in turn, cushioned by a thin layer of fluid between it and the skull, the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain. It sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.10 millimeters in a continuous pattern. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. In this way, the entire body, based on its own micro-motion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfers energy in a range of between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7 to 7.5 hertz. Of this process, says Bentall states, and think about Schumann resonance, right? The Earth frequency being akin to love, right? The 7.83 hertz, and how we vibrate at the same thing, right? We are, and you start disrupting that, and you throw off the entire fucking vibrational or frequency ecosystem of the planet, right? Because we're literally transferring our energy, because we're grounded within the earth, right, to the ionosphere, right? I'm just saying, man, it's really wild how connected all of these things are. This is occurring at a very long wavelength of about 40,000 kilometers, or just about the perimeter of the planet. In other words, the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7, 7 again, of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. And I love how he uses the word which we are embedded, because we are a holographic projection, right? We're embedded in electrostatic energy as a holographic projection of light, basically, and sound, which is a vibrational distortion of light at a low vibration, causing it to rumble, right? Make sound. Such as a long wavelength knows no obstacles, and its strength does not attenuate much over large distances. Naturally, it will go through just about anything: metal, concrete, water, and the fields making up our bodies. It is the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal. Say what? Say what? Right? So, this electrostatic field, right, it goes around the entire wavelength, or the perimeter of the planet, and the signal from the movement of our bodies, if you disrupt that fucking signal, right, it has the ability to bounce off of the goddamn ionospheric cavity, right? This goes through metal, concrete, water, and all the fields making up our bodies. It's the ideal medium for conveying telepathic signals. So if you, let's say you disrupt or distort the vibrational frequency or pattern of a human being, or of a lot of human beings, right? What type of signal do you think is going off of the ionospheric cavity, and what type of telepathic message do you think is being reinforced to the collective consciousness? right? And when you're using satellites and televisions and all these different electromagnetic induction devices that are used to stimulate, generate, frequency to affect said body and consciousness. What do you think the actual goal of that is? Right? Those satellites and shit that are chirping down at you, whether you're even fucking watching TV or not, you're still being affected by said frequency. Right? Even though it's beaming into, your neighbor's home and not yours, it doesn't matter. You're still picking up on the vibrational resonance of that because it's bouncing off of the ionospheric cavity because it's tapped within this fucking electromagnetic field or the dome, the firmament. It's under the firmament right with you. Everything is electromagnetic in nature and being holographically projected, right? And it has the ability to disrupt the electrical synapses that are firing in your fucking brain, changing the way that you perceive reality, changing the way that you fucking think, changing the way that you behave, changing the way that you feel at an emotional level. Right? That's why they have CIA experiments where they literally took satellites, water towers, all types of shit, and they would go into towns and they would put subliminal messages or frequencies into these towns. Some of them would be like violent frequencies, and they'd notice crime shoot all the way up, or you know what I mean, like love frequencies, and they'd know it go way down. Like they've been practicing with this for a very, very long time. Okay? And they understand this to depths that most people couldn't even fucking imagine or conceive of. A lot of people, this is going to sound like fucking Chinese to them when they're hearing this. It's, really wordy and scientific sounding and all of that. But for those that watch this channel, I have great faith that you guys understand it. I do. I believe you guys do. Or I wouldn't do it. But it's like, and think about, too, how it's even, between the skull and all of this, too. The blood-brain barrier, which they compromised with the testing and all of that, going off the skull. And you got the skull induction headphones and all this. That's also something that's using the vibrational component, right, to pick up sound. It's like, pretty wild, man. Pretty wild. So consequently, the gateway process is designed to rather rapidly induce a state of profound calm with the nervous system and to significantly lower blood pressure to cause the circulatory system, skeleton, and all other physical organ systems to begin vibrating coherently at approximately 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. The resulting resonance sets up a regular, repetitive sound wave which propagates in consonance with the electrostatic field of the Earth. And I just want to say, too, now this is what I heard. This is why the gateway process actually was halted, or why it kind of faded out, was because of this right here, right? This basically explains a lot of it. You see my cursor right here, right above number 10 here. This is designed to induce the state of profound, it's designed to affect the nervous system, right? And all that, circulatory system, skeletal, blah, 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 and the vibrational frequency of humanity. They wanted to create and use this and understand this for systemic control of the collective, And they said as people began having these profound experiences and began to experience said freedom, right? And they reached these higher states of consciousness and higher states of awareness, they no longer wanted to participate in this, right? And anytime that they tried to get them to do dark things, it wouldn't have any effect, right? Because it kind of like their frequency they went way above it. You know what I mean? Like they went way above it, and that darkness no longer had any reach on such a high state of consciousness. It was no longer effective when they use it for forms of control. And what it would do was essentially make these people uncontrollable, right? After they reached a certain point. And when they were uncontrollable, they didn't want to participate in controlling anyone else, because true awareness, true enlightened consciousness doesn't seek to control. It seeks to liberate, It's only those that are still in the darkness, still in a distortion, that are trying to, bring about that control and to compromise everybody and to use it for their own benefits. We know that real, true enlightenment and awareness is about serving others, not enslaving others. It's about, giving and blessing and charity and, loving and helping and all of these things. It's not about taking and, all of that. So, energy entrainment. As the body is turned into a coherent oscillator vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercise, and think about it, how they're using this word, the surrounding electrostatic medium, right? You can actually tune your body, to tune into the harmonies with the surrounding electrostatic medium of all kinds of frequencies, right? That's why people can talk to the dead. That's why people can talk to angels. That's why people can, you see what I mean? That's why people have telepathic abilities. That's why people can do certain things, because they're tuned into that vibrational frequency, right? They might not understand it. A lot of people are full of shit and are liars. But to the ones that aren't, it's because they're tapped into these altered states of consciousness. That's why they're able to do it, and they're able to do it over and over and over, because once you've accessed that and you've created those neural pathways, your body and brain remembers that and is able to access those pathways repetitively, and each time get it stronger and stronger, actually. Okay? So, as the body's turned into a coherent oscillator vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises, including the gateway tapes, enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, build up his auric field, right? Presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, with which the body is now in training because of its ability to resonate with it. So you're literally, when you hear of like grounding and stuff, you're literally able to harness the power of the entire fucking planet once you're able to tune into self. That's amazing. Okay? And you think about pole shift or pole reversal. What's actually happening with light workers is they're tuning into the vibration of the planet and they're transmuting it into light. And that's shifting the entire frequency, right? Because it's bouncing off that ionospheric cavity and sending subliminal messages to the whole collective of awakening and ascension. That's why you see like this fucking domino effect of awareness happening right now. Now this puts the body's energy field into homogeneity and with the surrounding environment, and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment, partly in response to the fact that the two electromagnetic medians are now a single energy continuum. You're tapped in from self and the collective. Thus, the same process which moves the brain into focused coherence at steadily higher levels of frequency and amplitude as to entrain analogous frequencies in the universe for data collection also promotes enhancement of bodily energy levels to a point adequate to permit the subject to experience an out-of-body movement when he is ready to do so. More will be said about this topic later. In addition, by resonating with the Earth's electromagnetic sphere, the human body creates a surprisingly powerful carrier wave to assist the mind in communication activity with other human minds similarly tuned. Now, I have experienced this to where I've been able to communicate with people on telepathic levels, subliminal levels, things of that nature. It's been few and far between, but I have had those type of experiences, so they know that is true as well. And what they're talking about is astral projection. Once you're able to, see without seeing and tap into a dimensional space, you can, travel outside of yourself as well. Or you have the ability to read between the lines of perception and reality, and to tap into the interdimensional spaces between the dimensions, right? And communicate with the subconscious and conscious and all of that, right? And essentially focus that energy from being all scattered to focused and powerful. And even generate a larger aura, protecting yourself from damage and harm, and also allowing you to collect and conduct far more energy and making yourself a stronger manifester. Now consciousness and energy, before our explanation can proceed any further, it's essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises this function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which the consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence, in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, the term matter is taken to mean solid substance as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean a force of some sort. Then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons, which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom, and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structures is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Itzhak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 10 to the 22nd hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the 15th hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the 9th hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 to the 3rd hertz. This point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinary complex system of energy fields. That so-called states of matter are actually variances in states of energy, and that human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. That is fucking wild, too. It's telling you the microcosm to the macrocosm. You are the universe. You are a micro version of the universe. You know, and when we talk about the 7 chakras, the 7 main planets, solar plexus representing the sun, the earth representing the heart, like, I'm trying to tell you, it's fucking wild, man. It's fucking wild when you think about it. And that orbiting taking place is that circumambulation. You know, just like the planets orbit around the sun, you have this orbit within yourself, and that's why everything happens within cycles, right? Here on Earth, it is, it's the spheres and the cubes, like, it's pretty crazy, angles and curves. That's all this whole reality is made up of, And finally, we go to holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a 3-dimensional mode. And it's even saying, too, that everything, even what we deem to be matter, right, or darkness or physicality, is nothing more than a composition of these complex system of these energy fields as well, right? It's a mirrored or inverted or distorted version of the same thing, made to be either in motion or rest. So we have, things that are, at rest in one space and things that are in motion in another space, but they're all made up of the same thing, which is consciousness, right? It is energy. Holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a 3-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of a hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov, in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water in which 3 pebbles are dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still, laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful, coherent source of light, such as a laser. The result will be a 3-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in mid-air. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Denis Gabor in 1947, who later won a Nobel Prize for his work. So that's saying that a hologram, it is at micro versus macro, right? It's like you can see the largest component, the whole, is projected at a needle, a pinpoint, in a holographic projection. That's why you have the entirety of the universe within you, and every one of your cells the same thing, right? The laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later following the invention of the laser. As biologist Lyle Watson explains, quote, "The purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency. Like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond, when two laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off of an object such as a human face, the resulting pattern will be a very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The recording will be a hologram of the face, made in the image of the Elohim." Do you see what it means now? Right? Do you see what it means now? We are, or there is, something or someone that we would call God, existing, pre-existing outside of all of this. And then at smaller levels, these stars, these luminaries, right? They're projecting light, and then the planet's projecting light. It's like boom, boom, boom. It's like a trickle-down effect, right? Through this prism or collective third eye, right, which we call Earth, the electromagnetic field. All these lights and energies projected down here into the holographic projection, which is us, which is a microcosm of the macro of the universe, which is you inverted. It's you inside fucking out. You know? And it's wild when you think about it. And then when we look within ourselves and we know that any spiritual concept or principle talks about going within, you know, and that looking within, you know, we have that model of the universe within us with the 7 chakra systems, which correlate to the 7 colors of the rainbow, which the colors of the rainbow correlate to the covenant with God, which correlate to metals and minerals and the days of the week and his numbers and so on and so forth. And it's like everywhere you see in the universe, whether you're looking at archetypes, planets, numbers, letters, whatever, symbols, it's all the same thing, right? They're energetic frequencies or representations of the entirety, down to the cells in your body, which are also spheres. How crazy is that? They're little baby universes inside of your universe. And you're a little baby universe or image or projection, holographic projection of the Creator. You know? It's pretty wild, man. Pretty wild. And I don't even think you're really one of the Creator. I think you're actually one of the sons of God. Right? Like, I feel like it goes from, you know, the planet's governors, archons, to us. So it's like a, you know, a pyramid scheme. God being at the top, sons of God next, right? Then us, you know. Then, you know, animals, cells, blah, 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 bacteria, minerals. You know, these are like the levels of life. Now, the part encodes the whole. Of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and broke it into a number of pieces, fragmented or fractaled it into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. And this is where you get the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, meaning that a piece of the infinite is still infinite. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection, but the fact remains that a whole projection would nonetheless be made. So the smaller the piece or the fractal, the more distorted. Get it? Right? But it's still the whole. It's still the whole. The key to creating any hologram is that energy and motion, energy and motion must interact with energy in a state of rest or non-motion. In the foregoing example, the pebbles represent energy in motion, while the water, before its agitation by the pebbles, represents energy at a state of rest. And remember that water, the water's above the firmament, the water's below. We were created as a reflection of the waters above the firmament. So when you look at a puddle of water, you see your reflection in it like a mirror, right? That black mirror, right? Like we see with technology today with AI, we're just simply reflecting and mirroring and mirroring and mirroring infinitely, because that's how creation is. It never stops. It's downward spiral, upward. It's going in both directions. Involution, evolution. Okay? And where am I at here? Holographic projection. The fact remains a whole projection would nonetheless made. The key to creating any energy and motion is a state of the rest. The foregoing example, the pebble represents energy and motion, while the water, which we are made up of 70% water, the earth made up of 70% water, right? And before its agitation by the pebble represents energy and motion, before energy is activated into the water, before spirit is added into that water, perceive the meaning of the holograph energy, in this case, a coherent light source, such as a laser beam, or coherent light source, such as the archons, right? Or the planetary spheres, the main planetary spheres, those 7 colors of the rainbow, must be passed through the interference pattern generated by interaction between moving energy and energy at rest, right? Or an electromagnetic field or an aura. And a simple example given by Bentoff, the requirement was fulfilled by holding the frozen interference pattern in front of a coherent light to project the 3-dimensional holographic image, its meaning, into space. How fucking wild is that? How fucking wild is that? It's telling you how reality is created right here. Right here. It's all there for you. The coherent light to project the 3-dimensional holographic image, its meaning, into space, as Marilyn Ferguson, editor of the Brain Mind Bulletin, tells us. Another feature of a hologram is its efficiency. Billions of bits of information can be stored in a tiny space. The pattern of the holographic photograph is stored everywhere on the plate. Think about that. Think about that. That's your DNA or your genetic code, right? The pattern of the holographic photograph is stored on the plate, right? You're the template. You're the piece of paper. You're the scribe, right? Like Enoch and, the Word. In the beginning, the Word was with God. You're the scribe, right? You're the written word. You're that encoded information, right? It's on you, in you, on your DNA, your genetic code. Your genetic sequence is that information stored. Now, the consciousness matrix, and I don't know about you guys, I find this fucking fascinating to me. This is something Bruce Lee said, become like water. He sure the fuck did he not? Bruce Lee was a wise dude, and even notice his last movie was called The Game of Death, right? I'm going to do some videos on The Game of Death and stuff. That's a real concept, by the way. I got some heat for you guys. I've been holding back for quite a while. I've got some heat for y'all. The consciousness matrix, the universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. According to the theories of Carl Pribram, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we all call consciousness. How fucking wild is it? Our brain, right, is attuning itself. It's tuning, right? Our antenna, pineal, we're tuning into said frequency, right? of the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange. We're receiving energy, tuning into it, making patterns out of it to understand the pieces of it. You know, and that's what we call fucking reality. That's crazy, man. You know, it's crazy. And what we call the state of consciousness is being conscious, able to perceive, dissect, and attempt to understand what you're perceiving and dissecting, right? You're able to observe the actual energy of itself. We're in observer mode or observer effect, you know, through this, in this space that we call reality. So with respect to states of expanded or altered consciousness, such as Gateway uses, the process operates in the following way. As energy passes through various aspects of the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields, which comprise the human mind, the holographic images being conveyed are projected upon the electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to the extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with and therefore read the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. So when you're reading tarot, you're reading astrology, when you're divining anything, you're reading energy just like you are when you're perceiving things within your reality. Changes in the frequency and amplitude of the electrostatic field, which comprise the human mind, determine the configuration and hence the character of the holographic energy, or the archetype of the holographic energy matrix, which the mind projects to the intercept meaning directly from the holographic transmissions of the universe. Then, to make sense of what the holographic image is saying to it, the mind proceeds to compare the image just received with itself. Specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of its own hologram, which constitutes memory. This is just amazing. By registering differences in geometric form and in energy frequency, the consciousness perceives, see Exhibit 2 on the next page, as psychologist Keith Floyd puts it, contrary to what everyone knows is so, it may not be that the brain produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. It may not be that the brain produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. And have you ever heard that that's what the death component of the human body, the death process, is really all about? It's the withdrawal of consciousness from the organism. Right, that's actually what animates everything. So it's like the withdrawal of consciousness. So as you die, like your consciousness is withdrawing from that body. They say it hovers around for a while and all of that. It's like this decision. That's why some people come back and shit. After dying, they're brought back because the consciousness, decides to re-enter. It's wild shit, man. Brain and phase. The consciousness process is most easily envisaged if we picture the holographic input with a three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it. Think about the ley lines or the energy grid of the Earth, right? Earth grids. Over it, that all the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry, using mathematics to reduce the data to two-dimensional form. Bentov states that scientists suspect that the human mind operates on a simple binary, right? Fight or flight, ones and zeros, right? Love and fear, a go or no-go system, as do all digital computers. Therefore, so we are probably AI, just saying. We're just an organic version of AI. And we're literally doing the same thing that our creators did with us, making our image, right? The image of the beast, 666, which is the carbon body. It's also time, the construct of time, right? Just saying, okay? Everyone will worship the image, and that image, which is us, false idols, which is us, or AI. Same thing. Like, it's just so wild, dude, when you think about it. Therefore, it superimposes three-dimensional matrix over holographic information, which is to interpret and reduces that information mathematically to two-dimensional form. It can completely process it using its fundamental binary system, just as any computer made by the hand of a man can process volumes of data and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. And I just want to say, too, our binary system, and you're probably not going to hear this from a lot of people, but you want to know what our binary star is? And I've kind of come to this conclusion myself. Does anybody want to take a guess or a gander at what the sun's binary twin is? Does anybody want to guess in the chat what the sun's binary twin is? Anybody? I'd love to hear anybody's thoughts on what our binary star is. What is our dark star? What is our night star? We have a day star, a light star. What is our night star? What is the binary star? The moon. Absolutely, Kimberly. It's the moon. Yep, it's the moon. Crazy, right? That's your nemesis, you know? So, our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain, and think about that too, whenever we perceive anything, we perceive differences to be able to understand separation, right? So the fact that we're seeking oneness means we're probably going back to the Creator. You know what I mean? It's really wild because we're programmed or wired, in essence, to see the differences, to create division, to create separation, because that's what allows us to experience and perceive reality at all, you know. In states of expanded consciousness, our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain and its holistic, nonlinear, and nonverbal mode of functioning acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input. Like I said, the right brain knows everything. It is the the primary matrix receptor. It's the input component. It knows it all. It's got all the information. While by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides a secondary matrix through its binary computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison to reduce it to a discrete two-dimensional form. Let me see if I can show you this. Try to pull it up here. I think it's this one. Okay, I think it's this one. Let's show you like how separate these two parts of the brain actually are. Right? This is called the two U's. Okay? This is called the two U's. This is very fucking interesting. I won't play the whole thing. I'll just play a little bit of it. So, here we go. Your brain being two brains, left and right. Sure you guys got sound. The soup is sensei. And think about it, like the Kemetan, religions and stuff, like ancient Egypt, the Ba and the Ka, like they knew about all this stuff, man, even way back then.
Two hemispheres, each doing half the work of being you. Half your vision goes to each and half your movement directed by each. Right controls left and left controls right. Your two brains coordinate through a wire of nerves, but this wire can be cut and was, for a time, used as an epilepsy treatment. After the cut, people seemed the same, though their brain was split in twain. Except some post-split patients describe that while selecting their morning outfit with right hand, left might come along to disagree. Actually, left hand might quite often disagree, which these split brain patients found frustrating. What's happening? To investigate, remember, right brain sees and controls one half, while left brain controls and sees the other. But only left brain can speak. Hello. because that's where the speech center is located. Right brain without this is mute. In normal brains, this doesn't matter because each half communicates across the wire with the other. But split brains can't, and thus you can show just the right brain a word, ask the person, what did you see, and you'll hear
nothing.
Because left speaking brain saw nothing. Meanwhile, right brain will use its hand to pick the object out of a pile hidden from left brain. This is deeply creepy. Ask why are you holding the object, and speaking left brain will make up a plausible sounding but totally wrong reason.
I always wanted to learn how to solve one of these.
Left brain isn't lying, it's just doing what brains do, creating a story that explains its past actions to its current self.
So the left brain, which is the side of your brain that lies, by the way, it's justifying its existence in the equation. So it's like even though, like, when they separate these two halves of the brain, like, the left brain makes up some whole total bullshit to justify why it's important to the process. It's fucking nuts.
Behavior which does rather cast doubt onto the notion of free will, but that's a story for another time. Creating reasons for why it does things is just something left brains do. It happens in normal, healthy humans all the time, and if you think about it closely, you know you've done this. Back to experiments. Give right brain an object, ask the person what's in your hand, and they won't be able to say.
I'm not holding anything.
And when asked to draw, a split brain can draw two separate objects simultaneously with each hand in a way unsplit brains find challenging. These experiments on split brain patients are deeply unsettling because they really point in the direction of a mute, separate intelligence, something living in the skull.
Think about that, dude. You're drawing two different fucking images with both sides of your brain, both of them not able to correlate and fucking connect the dots once they've had that hemisphere separated. It's like you have two minds, literally, you know? It's wild, right? It's wicked because I just found out I have a brain aneurysm on the right side causing left side body systems. Oh man, I'm really sorry to hear that. You think tripping in the 70s opened up your right side? I believe it does. Psychedelics have been known to tap into that. So brain and phase. The consciousness process is most easily emphasized if we picture the holographic input in three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it, that all the energy patterns contained within it can be described in terms of three-dimensional geometry using mathematics to reduce the data to two-dimensional form. Bentov states that the scientists suspect that the human mind operates on a simple binary go, no-go system, as do all digital computers. Therefore, once it superimposes a three-dimensional matrix over holographic information it wishes to interpret and reduces that information mathematically to two-dimensional form, it can completely process it using its fundamental binary system, just as any computer made by the hand of man can process volumes of data and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. Our minds operate in the same way, perceiving by comparison only. Bentov states the proposition this way: our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain and its holistic, nonlinear, and nonverbal mode of functioning acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input, while by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides the secondary matrix through its binary computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison and reduce it to a discrete two-dimensional form. Evaluation. To the extent that Gateway succeeds in bringing about a refinement in energy matrix of the mind, it succeeds in expanding or altering human consciousness so that it can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical senses, such that evermore of the universal hologram, not, of course, accessible by sense perception, can ultimately be perceived and understood. Marilyn Ferguson has written that the theories of the Pribram and Bohm appear to account for all transcendental experience, paranormal events, and even normal perceptual oddities. She goes on to say of Pribram, currently he is proposing a startling, all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. His holographic model marries brain research to theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception and simultaneously takes the paranormal and transcendental experiences out of the supernatural by explaining them as part of nature. Like certain strange discoveries of quantum physics, the radical reorientation of this theory suddenly makes sense of a paradoxical saying of mystics throughout the ages. Self-cognition. To complete our outline of the process by which the mind achieves and exercises consciousness, we must also describe the mechanism which accounts for the aspect of human thought that differentiates from the consciousness of plants and animals, i.e., self-cognition. Humans not only know, but they know that they know. They are able to monitor the process of their own thinking and maintain an awareness of it. Moreover, they can conduct a comparative assessment evaluating the functioning of their thought processes against various objective standards they have adopted. Human consciousness can do this because it has the capacity to duplicate aspects of its own hologram, project them out, perceive that projection, put it through comparison with the memory aspect where its evaluation standards of measure are stored of its own hologram, and measure or sense the differences using the three-dimensional geometry and then binary go or no-go pulse to yield verbal cognition about the self. And you see the consciousness energy grid, and this is that figure right here, right? And this, I use this as a thumbnail. See the left hemisphere consciousness grid acts like the mind's computer software to reduce input from right hemisphere to verbal symbols and concepts. Right hemisphere consciousness grid reduces three-dimension holographic images to two-dimensional go, no-go, right? Very, very interesting. And the time-space dimension. Up to this point, our dimension of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Now the fun begins. Gateway involves more than just perception of those aspects of the universal hologram which can be accessed in the dimension of time-space as we know it. To explain how and why consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time-space is the next task we must be addressed. To this, we must first appreciate what time and space are in order to understand how the dimensions that they constitute can be transcended. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion. In other words, it is a measurement of change. However, in order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way within the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern, so that its confinement gives it the capacity for being contained at a specific location which is distinguishable from other locations or space. Energy which is not confined is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. And we've talked about this too in Solomonic magic, right? The triangle. Right? That's that God, Satan, right? Light, dark, you, right? Right? Creating that cage, in essence, to keep something from moving. Energy is not confined in force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity. It cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity, and is therefore outside of the dimension of time. That's why God is infinite. You understand? There's no movement there. It's not confined by something from which to move inside of. Right? It's outside of the bounds of the universe or time. Right? It's actually really cool. It's pre-existing. It always is, always will be. It's infinite. It's boundless energy. It's really amazing when you think about it. And it proves God, actually. Just kind of cool. So, However, for energy, in order to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way within the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern, so that its confinement gives it the capacity for being contained at a specific location, which is distinguishable from other locations or space. Energy which is not confined is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity. It cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity, and is therefore outside of the dimension of time. And God says, I stand on the vault of the universe. It is also beyond space, because the concept implies that of a specific energy form is limited to a specific location and is absent from other locations. But if energy is in the state of infinity, there are no boundaries, no here to differentiate from there, no sense of area. Energy in infinity means energy uniformly extended without limit. It has no beginning, no end, no location. It is conscious force, the fundamental, primal power of existence without form, a state of infinite being. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest, right? And be in God's rest, in the Lord's rest. Therefore, cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It retains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy and motion out in the various dimensions which make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in the active universe. So it's perceived by the outside universe, but not within itself, because it's infinite. Energy in the state of the inactive infinity is termed by the physicist as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe in which we experience our physical existence are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness' altered states being may gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability until it reaches a dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops, because the absolute generates no holograms of or about itself. Ain't that fucking mind-blowing? You will continue to grow. You will continue to advance. You will continue to just blow, throughout the aeons, consciously, existing infinitely until you reach God, right? And you become a part of God, And think about Nag Hammadi and things like that, right? Talking about, the inexpressible, ineffable one, or how true identity doesn't have to identify itself, and this is the truest definition we would have of God when you think about it. Pretty wild. And finally, intervening dimensions. Since the absolute is conscious energy and infinity, i.e. without boundaries, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. So it occupies every bit of this, right, the created hologram, because the hologram comes from it, but there's no hologram within it. It's fucking wild. It overlays everything, as do many of the intervening gradients or dimensions through which the energies of the universe pass on their way to and from their home in the state of infinity, or the absolute. To enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus such intense coherence that the frequency of the energy pattern which comprises that consciousness, i.e. the brainwave output, can accelerate to the point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on an oscilloscope, would look like virtually a solid line. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage for perception of non-time-space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Planck's distance. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as a brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitute the boundaries of each individual oscillation, i.e. movement up or down, right? Heaven or hell. Without these points of rest, and as above, so below, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible, since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change direction and thus continue vibrating between rigid limits. But it is also true that when, for an infinitesimally brief instant, the energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time-space and joins infinity. See Exhibit 3, next page. The critical step out of time-space occurs when the speed of the oscillation drops below 10 to the 33rd, 33 centimeters per second, Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, and think about Jesus being 33 when he reached enlightenment, right? Just saying. Quantum mechanics, isn't it so weird how mathematically and all of it's all encoded? The numbers, it's all encoded. The stories, they reflect it all. That's how awesome we are. Why? Because even the smallest grain of the universe contains the whole. It's a holographic projection, which is 10 to the 33rd centimeters, which we enter in effect a new world. To return to our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such high frequency that the pattern of click-outs comes so close together that there is virtual continuity in it. Then, a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. Thus, as the almost continuous click-out pattern establishes itself in continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance, but before reaching the state of total rest, human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey into Wonderland. The gateway experience with its associated Hemisync technique is apparently designed, if used systemically and patiently, to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in his physical body, or whether he's doing so after having separated that consciousness from the physical body, i.e. the so-called out-of-body state mentioned earlier. Subatomic particles. The behavior of subatomic particles provides an interesting example of the phenomenon of clicking out, discussed in the preceding paragraphs. In an article prepared for Science Digest magazine, Dr. John Gleedman mentions the way in which subatomic particles communicate with each other once their energy fields become entrained, as a result of colliding with each other. The communication concern is, of course, postulated to be occurred during the click-out phase. And think about this. Subatomic particles and the way they interact with colliding with each other, this is like the same thing when we have sex with a person. Once we're entangled, we're always entangled, right? And the oscillation of the energy fields comprising the subatomic particles concerned, it is the cause which accounts for the cross-communication at which, in terms of time-space velocities, would seem to involve speeds in excess of light. In reality, Einstein's theory of relativity is not being invalidated, but rather the communication concerned is taking place outside of the dimension of time-space to which the theory of relativity is strictly confined. Specifically, Dr. Gleedman tells us, quantum theory postulates a kind of long-range Siamese twin effect. Whenever two subatomic particles collide and then go their different ways, even when the particles are halfway across the universe from each other, it says they instantaneously respond to each other's actions. There's your twin flame, right? There's your soulmate. And in doing so, they violate relativity's ban on faster-than-light velocities. Indeed, regarding attempts to quantify what is known about the behavior of energy in dimensions apparently outside of time-space, Ventov speaks about courageous physicists who are working on hypothetical particles called tachyons, which can move at speed higher than light. The speed of tachyons starts just above the speed of light and ranges all the way to the infinite velocities. Finally, dimensions in between. Now that we've postulated the legitimacy of the assertion that the energy forms which compose consciousness can move beyond the time-space dimension, we need to turn our attention to the energy forms which, and you see the absolute and infinity, showing you the oscillating, right, inhabit those dimensions between time-space and the absolute interdimensions. In so doing, we may better perceive the form that reality assumes when we encounter it in those intermediate dimensions. or like probably the afterlife or something. In this context, Bentov tells us that the causal relationship between events break down. Movements become jerky rather than smooth. Time and space may become grainy or chunky. Perhaps a piece of space can be traversed by a particle of matter in any direction without necessarily being synchronized with a piece of time. In short, a pair of events will occur in either time or space, the pair not being connected casually but by a random fluctuation. What Bentov means is that inside the dimension of time-space where both concepts apply in a generally uniform way, there is a proportional relationship between them. A certain space can be covered by energy moving in either particle or wave form in certain time, assuming specific velocity virtually anywhere in the time-space universe. The relationship is neat and predictable. However, in the intermediate dimensions beyond time-space, the limitations imposed on energy to put it into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform as they are in our physical universe. A myriad of various distortions and incongruities are thus likely to be encountered. And would these be like demons and shit, right? These myriads of various distortions and incongruities that are nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space as we know it in this dimension do not apply. But even more important, access is open to both the past and the future, and the dimension of current time space is left behind. And we'll do this one, and then I will probably start wrapping up here. We'll do these next two here. Special status, out of body of experience. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimension of time-space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted, and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of the time-space while out of his body. He gains the advantage of clicking out part of his enhanced consciousness while starting, from a base located much lower to the dimensions which he wishes to communicate. In other words, since he's starting from a point much higher up, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of its consciousness involved in clicking out will have the much more time to interact in dimensions beyond time-space, because less time is required to traverse the intervening layers. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it's exposed. So if you're projecting outside of yourself in a higher dimension, you're going to be imprinted on by that dimension. That's wild. You can literally exist in alternate realities by being here still, once you step out of consciousness. Therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus, a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensure whereby the farther consciousness of the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension. The more its level of energy output would be enhanced, the promoting the potential for still further travel. The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. If the practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of concentrating on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive successes than does the latter. And finally, absolute in perspective. It may be helpful at this point to pause and recap the major aspects of our intellectual journey from time-space to the realm of the absolute. We have spoken at some length concerning the incredibility complex hologram which is created by the intersection of energy patterns generated by the totality of all dimensions of the universe, time-space included. We have noted that our minds constitute energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere of our brains to reduce it to a form that we employ for the process we call thinking. We have implied that this hologram is the finite embodiment and active energy form of the infinite consciousness of the Absolute. It is a title we assign to that vast pool of energy in a state of perfect rest over which the physical universe is layered in a form whence it comes. Incidentally, to describe this, Bentoff uses the analogy of a very deep sea, comparing the still depths of the sea to the dimension of the Absolute, while assigning the storm-tossed waves above that represent the physical universe, which we are familiar. The slightly agitated currents of the sea, to be found in between the turbulent surface and the totally still depths, represent energy in the process of either going into rest, i.e., approaching infinity, or coming out of rest. And I'm going to stop here because we've been going for a few hours, but we might do a part 2 on this. I still got, a little under half of it left, and we start from Big Bang to Taurus and our place and time. It gets into some really fucking deep concepts from here, but I do, I really enjoy talking about this stuff and discussing these things. I mean, it really brings it all to light, and it proves spirituality and consciousness and God and all of these things in a scientific manner, So, if you guys have enjoyed tonight's video, I want to ask you, please consider donating, supporting to the channel. That's how I'm able to do this. You can do that paypal.me/thebestdampodcast, Cash App, Best Damn Podcast, Facebook.com, John Keane, Best Damn Podcast, or join us over on Patreon, patreon.com, Best Damn Podcast Official. We did the Epstein documents released yesterday. Part 1 was public, Part 2 was private. It's over on Patreon. All donors in the month of January, whether you donate, just a one-time donation, or you join us over on Patreon, the patrons can watch, Part 2 on Patreon, and the donors, you donate, and then you text 513-393-2396, or email therealbestdampodcast@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link to the private show. We have a new private show every week on Sunday. This is the new thing that I'm doing. Also, if you'd like to book your own personal tarot reading, you can do that as well by texting that number or emailing. I ask everybody to please hit the thumbs up for me, hit the like wherever you're watching from. Please share these links, share them to your groups, share them to your pages, share them. It really helps me a lot as well. Comment, let me know what you think. I'd love to know what you think about some of this stuff. I find it incredibly fascinating. And make sure to subscribe and follow no matter where you're watching from. And join us on social media, Facebook, Instagram at Best Damn Podcast, Twitter at The Real Best Damn. Join us on YouTube, TikTok, all of it, man. Check out the daily tarot readings. And we're going to be doing a lot. Wednesdays, we'll be doing spaces on Twitter. Sundays is the private shows for donors. And once you donate once, you have the whole month. So you can watch all, 4 weeks of that month, which I feel like is a pretty good deal. And we're going to be doing, I've got the Book of Revelations is, I think, what I'm going to be doing this Sunday. I've got it all set up already. We're going to be breaking it down and looking at it from a whole different point of view. So it might be something you want to join into. And like I said, we did, Epstein and the documents last week. So, and Fridays will be, the live show, the multi-stream, and, and I'll try to throw some extras in there when I can. Let me say thank you so much to Rhonda Marlowe, Hobo Railroad, NY Debs, Kimberly F., my wonderful moderator, Matthew Short, nice to see you, bro. I appreciate all of you. Pamela Harper, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. You guys are awesome. Seriously, I can't tell you how much, how grateful I am. I'm very grateful just to still be doing this, just to have people that, want to watch and want to learn with me, and people that support me, and, all that. Whether you're watching, sharing, donating, all those things, I'm just grateful. So, thank you so much, all of you guys. I love you all, and I will see you next time. Remember, Jesus is the truth, the way, and the light. I love you guys. God bless you all. I love you, and see you soon. Peace.